So the oil this week is oregano. And most of you know oregano for viral, bacterial, and other kinds of infections, and it is a powerhouse for those things. But oregano oil is also fantastic, especially doTERRA's, because it is very pure. Fantastic in all kinds of recipes. We use it in our pizza sauce, our pastas, dipping sauces, all things like that. It's very, very versatile. It's also really helpful in cleaning products. It, again, works on the level of bacteria and viruses, but it doesn't kill all the good stuff. So this is one of the other reasons that oregano oil is really powerful. But on an emotional level, oregano oil, a lot of people don't necessarily think of oregano oil to use in diffusing or in blends that they apply topically for emotional purposes. And I find oregano oil is much like how it cleanses like parasites and bacteria and viruses. When we're sort of stubbornly hanging on to certain parts of ourselves, but we're pushing up against sort of the barrier of breakthrough. And on the other side of that is liberation, and on the other side of that is this expansion. But there's this sort of like feeling that you're pushing up against something, and you need to sort of cleanse it out of your system so that you can reach that breakthrough. I find oregano is very powerful, especially combined with other herbs and softened by some flowers, even some spices. It's really nice diffused. Yeah, so follow me at Humanly Designed for a lot more information about oregano throughout the month of July. You can get 10% off oregano oil. And yeah.
Welcome to the Finding Free Thought podcast.
This podcast is funded by you. To support our work, please consider making a purchase from our Free Thought shop. Check out my campsite at campsite.bio/goodresonance, where you can follow me on social media, make a donation, subscribe to my newsletter, check out my essential oils offerings, and grab my restorative teas ebook. Please subscribe to the audio version of this podcast on Apple and Podbean, and the video version on YouTube and Rumble.
Be sure to check out my 6-episode sci-fi comedy series, Simon Esler's Dystopian Imaginarium, along with my 60-minute comedy special, Theorize About Conspiracies, and my 3-season hit show, Worlds Within, all on Rise TV. And don't forget to hit up simonesler.com for all of my work, to join my newsletter, for links to purchase my NFTs, make donations, and follow me on all social media. You can also join my locals community, Team Free Thought, at teamfreethought.locals.com, where I'll be offering subscribers previews of new sketch comedy material, documentary work, and private broadcasts for supporters only. As a member of Team Free Thought, $5 a month gets you all of that plus a 15% discount at the Free Thought shop. Welcome to the Finding Free Thought podcast. I always yell at the beginning. I noticed this as an editor. I always yell welcome. Let me say it more calmly. Welcome to the Finding Free Thought podcast. Today, we are going to talk about the Big Bang Theory and dark matter and abortion and how these things actually fit together through the theories of human design. So Amanda is going to start us off with a quote, and we're going to go from there. Amanda, tell the good people what you're about to toss at them.
So one of the foundations of human design is juxtaposition theory. So getting a good understanding of that, I think, in my opinion, is part of it.
Juxtaposition theory?
Yeah.
Okay, go on.
So I'll just read it.
This is from what?
This is from Living Your Design.
Okay.
Okay, so it says, in simple language, juxtaposition theory is about chickens and eggs. Which came first? The answer, according to human design, is neither. They began together, inseparable but opposite, not integrated but juxtaposed. The word juxtaposition points towards the existence of two forces that stand next to each other. They do not become one. In fact, the juxtaposition of two forces creates a third force. This is a basic pattern that also lies at the heart of human design revelation. That all life is a duality and has always been so, even from the beginning. With duality, you have friction, and out of friction comes life itself. The basis of juxtaposition theory is that the universe is not one single entity, as the name universe suggests. In fact, we live in a biverse because it is made up of two of very different sets of forces. The universe that we see and that our scientists study is actually only an aspect of the greater duality. To put it simply, we can only see half the story. When the physicists first began studying the elements of the atomic world, they found something rather extraordinary that was very puzzling to them. They discovered that particles and waves, the building blocks of life, seemed to regularly transform into one another. Obviously, they knew that this was impossible, so they began to speculate that they themselves were actually affecting the experiment. This gave rise to a whole new exciting set of theories involving further dimensions. Superstring theory is the name of the most popular current model for explaining our universe, and it's based on the existence of other dimensions beyond our three-dimensional perceived world. According to juxtaposition theory, the physicists are getting closer to the truth. We live in a four-dimensional world, the fourth dimension being time and space. And anything we measure, scientifically or otherwise, is limited by these four dimensions. Metaphysically speaking, we inhabit the yang world of light, but there exists alongside our perceived world another world. Alongside our world juxtaposed is the yin world of darkness. The yin world is a five-dimensional world and cannot be seen by us, even though its laws govern all existence. If you're now feeling lost, let me give you an image. Our perceived universe is a fetus, growing in the womb of another unseen universe. In other words, we think we're alone, but something else knows we're not. This is exactly the image that was given when the human design system was revealed. We are an unborn entity, and until we are born, we are not able to see the bigger picture. Interestingly enough, the very latest scientific theories are based on a model known as brain world, which postulates that our universe is surrounded by a membrane that obscures us from the higher dimensions. The whole point of all of this is to understand that human design is founded upon something that we cannot see, and thus it has to be tested rather than believed. One of the greatest challenges to a skeptical mind is the correlation between who we are and the time of our birth. Human design is not about proving anything on the mental level. It's the experience of actually living out our design that will finally prove the value of this knowledge to each one of us. The proof of the pudding, as always, lies in the eating.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, the first thing that I want to jump into with that quote is really just the idea that we live in an unborn universe. I think there's a lot there, especially today, if we're talking about how these larger macrocosmic ideas that human design presents here connect to the more microcosmic sort of abortion debate that's occurring right now, and the drama around Roe versus Wade, and the tension that has arisen for the human species around abortion and what abortion means, and when is life valid, and when can life be killed in the womb, and all of this, right? So it reveals that we assumed we were in a universe that was born. But in fact, what this is saying is that we're in a universe that's it's just been conceived, but it's unborn.
Well, that's sort of what is being said in human design, is that the Big Bang was the conception. And so we're still here. Yeah. We're a growing fetus, basically.
So I just had to adjust the light there. Okay, so we are currently, as a universe, we are a growing fetus. So first thing I'll just say, I hope we don't get aborted by whatever cosmic entities involved in this. But let's just follow this theory through, because there's a lot to deal with here, right? Like, if indeed this is true, then and when you first showed this information to me, this was my first question: was what is it going to look like when it's born, when this universe is born? If we are a fetus in development in some sort of cosmic womb, then what is the birth? Is the birth through us as sentient beings? My initial desire is to postulate that it has to do with the awareness of beings such as ourselves, as a mechanism for the universe to wake up to itself. Mm-hmm. What are your feelings about that?
Yeah, I do think that It involves our consciousness, and it involves also us to surrender to the vehicles for real for a while. And not really sure what that might look like. I think there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't really, people are just sort of beginning to sort of trust the vehicle, and even to kind of take that position of being a passenger.
Well, let's unpack that for a moment, because that's a pretty simple insight into the way human design describes the human being.
Mm-hmm.
That we are living in a body, which is a vehicle, and it's being driven by something called the magnetic monopole. So that's the driver. And then you have the personality, which is the passenger.
Mm.
That's the breakdown, right? We can show the image, I think. But I just think that's helpful to clarify, because what it means is people surrendering to being the passenger and allowing the vehicle to be driven. It's really a surrendering to the life path, to the life path, and that your body is your life path.
The passenger, it's like you observing all the parts of yourself. You're saying, this is like my vehicle, and your vehicle kind of like wants to go in this direction. And then you have your mind, and your mind wants to go and bring the vehicle where it goes. And that's how most of us live. We use our minds to drag our bodies along. And so human design is all about flipping that, 180ing the situation, and having the body now put the mind in its place as the passenger. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is that it's just always like this. So, that's why it's kind of this thing where you're like kind of waking up to the fact that you've been the passenger all along.
Well, anyone who has had significant synchronicities, I mean, I can speak to this personally, is that some of the most significant synchronicities I've had in my life were when I let go and just followed my body. When I just quieted down my mind and just went, oh, my body wants to go here or here. My body wants to look at this thing. And then suddenly some sort of incredible web of meaning emerges and like shifts my perception or awakens me to something or supports me in some sort of way. And all the times when that's been strongest are when I let my body lead and my mind became secondary. I can say that this happened to me early on in my spiritual journey with crystals, where I was guided to a crystal shop I didn't know existed. And it was all very synchronistic. It was during a time in my life, and even in that day when I had no like life pressure going on. So I was sort of free to do this. And I think it does require a certain amount of relaxation, right? Like the letting go, like you have to become a more relaxed being overall if you're going to submit to the life path as it exists within the body. But I was in a day where I was able to create that kind of flow when I was in my 20s. And that really opened up my understanding. I'm looking back on it now with this information, and it's very clear the extent to which true synchronicity comes from following the body or allowing the body to lead or understanding that the body is leading anyway.
But what does that look like? Because unfortunately, including myself, why I'm asking this is because I've been led astray by terms like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
What does it really mean to follow your body? Like, I thought I was following my body for many years now.
Yes.
I was sometimes, I wasn't many, many other times, and I'm still not in so many ways.
Yeah.
So, I think there's just been a lot of like confusion. And naturally so, because now I look back and I laugh and I go, what was I even doing in life? Like, how was I making any decision? It was just loose every time. It was like, sometimes I feel intuition. Sometimes I completely strategize it. Sometimes there was a lot of anxiety because in the end, I wasn't trusting anything really wholeheartedly, not consistently.
Yeah.
So that tells me there's a lot of not self going on, because I'm just like going here, I'm going there, I'm trusting all different things.
But this is what I mean, is that knowing what you're saying now, You can do both. You can look back and see those times when you didn't have a real decision-making process. You were living in a sort of vague, new agey space where decision-making was not guided by any true principles or systems or understandings.
But what does
you
it
can
feel like?
also look back on the times when you're like, I was properly letting my body lead there. There were times, like they become more clear in retrospect or in hindsight, you know?
Yeah.
You can do both. You can see both. You can be like, wow, well, in the majority, and you can know also that in those instances when you really followed your body, you didn't really understand the importance of what you were doing at that time. Not the way you can now.
Yeah, because none of the, like, that's the other difficult thing about this process, about sort of realizing that you're the passenger and then, keeping the mind in its place, so that it has its new role. It's just being like demoted in a way. uh, then, you can kind of eventually get your mind to trust you a little bit and then trust you a little bit more. Like, it's really a protective thing, and it's something that's been well developed because of, seven-centered, in our seven-centered part of our evolution, we were strategic beings. We used our minds. That
this is
was
a
what
really
happened.
important
So we
point.
carry with us the conditioning from that. And we don't know we're nine-centered. And so this is why it's revolutionary. It's going, oh, well, you never knew. Like, we've been nine-centered. We've been existing for, quite some time, but without the awareness of that. So like the heavy conditioning of the seven-centered times, that just simply isn't working. These fear-based strategic and mental fears and stuff like that.
Well, so let's pull
really
all this back then to this sort of beginning of what we were talking about.
The juxtaposition theory.
There's this juxtaposition theory, and there's this idea that these two forces in the universe are currently developing this universe in its fetal stages.
Mm-hmm.
We're somehow tied up in that. And that our ability to put the mind in its place and to live the truth of the vehicle as the life path, the vehicle as the guide, is part of this universe's birthing process.
You will experience more, like, well, I can't say what you will experience, but what I've been experiencing is more, I see why juxtaposition theory is the basis of human design, because it becomes very much more visible, like, I guess, is a sense. Like, you can see it in yourself, you can see it in the world, you can just see it as a force. And it's mechanical. Like, these things, again, we have to remember, this is not new agey stuff. It's mechanical, it's logical, it's science.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with like spirituality. Yes, it's things we cannot see. But because, and this comes into neutrinos.
Yeah.
Because before science could prove that neutrinos actually are matter, Ra had been talking about these neutrinos.
But for people who don't know, Ra is the person who received the human design system and then disseminated it to the world.
Yeah.
And part of what he received was just the scientific fact of neutrinos and the extent to which they are constantly impacting the human journey. They are the human journey in many ways, right? It is informed by neutrinos, which is dark matter.
Yeah, exactly. So this is the juxtaposition, right? So it's like,
but you were saying that it wasn't confirmed in science, but
yeah. And so he had said, this is what's creating such a large impact on our existence.
Mm-hmm.
But science had only, predominantly been focused on like what we can see. So that's, the atomic world. 10% of our universe is atomic.
Yes.
So
little fraction.
Whatever. So that science is predominantly focused on what we can see.
But this is how science became fascinated with dark matter.
Yeah. And so then we have dark matter. And so you're like, okay, that's crazy. Actually, most of the universe we can't see.
It's unseen matter.
So for some reason, because of that, they determined, because if it's just energetic, it doesn't have clearly as much of importance as something that we can see. But then, of course they were doing, some research. I don't know all the research they were doing on neutrinos, but when, Ra heard the voice and got all this information and then started putting human design together, they had not at that point, they still believed neutrinos to just be pure energy.
They believed it was a wave, a light wave, and not a particle.
Yeah, it was like an electromagnetic or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 1995 that science caught up and did prove that it is incredibly light, but it is actual matter.
Yes.
So this is profound. Like, you're like, okay, so like actual matter is blasting through all our bodies. What was it?
66 trillion?
66 trillion per square centimeter per second.
On the whole planet. So all of Earth
planet
is being completely saturated with 66 million neutrinos. 66 trillion. Sorry, yes. Huge difference.
I know.
66 trillion neutrinos per square centimeter per second. So we are absolutely drenched in neutrinos.
We're swimming
all the time.
in neutrinos.
We're swimming. We're in a sea of neutrinos.
It's more than anything else.
This is like the video I just made with the fish tripping out, and what the hell is water? The fish saying, "What the hell is water?" Right? For the human being, the water is neutrinos. But okay, so this is super interesting because you have the majority of the universe is made up of dark matter, and the dark matter is informing the evolution of this universe, or the development of this universe in this fetal stage, right? The dark matter is informing it constantly, all the time. Now, dark matter comes from the breath of stars, right? And the mantle within the star. And so what you have is a universe filled with stars that are breathing neutrinos into that universe. And those neutrinos are developing this universe towards its own birth, us being in the conception phase right now. Again, please don't abort us. So it's really, really crazy because, even to take that down to the abortion debate within human design, there's very clear notions of what's going on in terms of stages of development. And we won't get into the specific stages in human design today. We're going to do a deep dive on that another episode. But the idea here is that the Big Bang, which eventually resulted in a sea of stars pumping neutrinos, led us to this point now where we're struggling with a debate like abortion. But in fact, the extent to which a fetus is imprinted by neutrinos from the human design perspective impacts whether or not it is a human being in that sense. So there's a specific stage at which in the human design body of knowledge, the neutrinos have impacted that fetus, and that fetus's design and personality are starting to come together. And so before that, if you were to take the human design perspective, the abortion would be less controversial. So,
well, the idea is that, the basic thing is that you really have two charts in human design, and then it comes together to be like your quantum sort of being blueprint. But you have two sides. You have your personality, which is like what you thought you just were on its own. But then you have this whole other side that you had no idea was just there. And that's your design.
Yeah.
That's your unconscious. That's your vehicle. But it's there. And it's actually like the most important thing. It's running the show to a certain extent. But your mind, your personality thinks it's the one.
Now, is that not microcosmic of the first theory you talked about?
Yes, of course. And that's why juxtaposition is like, again, part of the bedrock of human design. And you'll see it. You'll see it in your life. I see it a lot. It comes up. And so in sort of the developing of a fetus over 9 months, we already know that so much occurs very slowly or very quickly, depending on how you look at it. But a lot does occur, but at different stages. Like we already know, like whatever the sort of stages that science is called, like the 9 months, first term, second term, third term. But human design has like very specifics that go much beyond that, and in an interesting way. But essentially, the design part of you, the vehicle part of you, is sort of fully developed at 88 degrees before your birth. So there's on the mandala of yours. So it's like the moment you're born, you're imprinted on your personality. And so at that point, then you can calculate back to when the design form was like available to like take in a personality, basically.
How far back does it calculate?
It's about 3 months.
It's about
88 degrees.
Okay, so
88
just
degrees.
Generically speaking, if a baby is born at 9 months, then it's the 6-month point.
Is when the body design crystal is formed. So it's like complete in that sense. So then the personality crystal can enter at that point. So, and it's true, like, yeah, sure. If you're born before 6 months,
before 9 months, you mean?
No, before 6 months.
Oh, like a preemie before 6 months.
It's very unlikely that the baby would spread. Not saying that, anything's
Sometimes
possible.
It happens, yeah.
But again, when you think about it, it's like, yeah, there's a process when after 6 months, I'm not saying it's still dangerous, at 7 months and 8 months to have a baby. But essentially it's a little bit more able to survive, right?
Well, so this is
there's all about the crystals, right? So it's like about the design and the personality being able to enter into a body.
Well, it's the integration of the yin and the yang here, right? We're talking about the integration of your conscious and unconscious aspects at around 6 months, which means we're dealing with more of a human being than prior to that.
Yeah.
Well, this is interesting because the states in the US that are currently like New York State and California, they're pushing for abortions up to 24, 28 weeks. Okay, which is really like close to that point, actually, interestingly enough. So potentially, they're looking to have abortions after this point when a human being's personality and design, when their body and their personality have actually come together and a more aware human being has arrived in the womb, in that sense, through the extent to which they have been imprinted by the dark matter constantly.
Yeah, like they're able to be imprinted when they're born, if they're born. So
there's multiple things going on here, because you have the neutrinos, the dark matter has imprinted their design up till 6 months, right?
Yeah, because they're building like these sort of building blocks. But yeah, like there are all these stages. And then after that time, and sort of it's like building the personality crystal. So it's like that will house the personality. That will be the home of the imprinting of the personality.
So there's the imprint of the design, and then, but the personality is emerging and beginning to integrate with the design, but it's not until the baby comes into the world that they are imprinted by the dark matter so that their personality is solidified.
Yeah, like it's just, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, seemingly. I'm just talking in generic ways of like, okay, you have these instances in which the human being is imprinted by dark matter and they impact. So we have this whole huge different perspective going on here. And so if we were to resolve the debate, the abortion debate through dark matter science, let's say we got advanced enough as a species to prove everything human design is talking about here, and we're able to measure the saturation of neutrinos on a fetus and really like actually get hyper specific. And
but I always say strategy and authority. So you can go and like think about all those things, and it's really fun, and it's really good even to have like outer authority conversations and dialogue about these things, to like really, to really think about. But if you're making a personal choice for yourself and you get pregnant, you have to use your strategy and authority.
Absolutely.
You can't use any system that just blankets you into a choice because it's ethical or not.
Yeah. Yeah, well, this is
Like,
the falling
it's
of these
really,
systems. It's interesting because the Roe versus Wade thing, on the one hand, it's devastating for many because they feel that their right to abortion has been ripped away from them, and they're very upset. Frankly, a lot of what I've seen is people freaking out in states that are keeping abortion, which is a bit confusing.
well, it's virtuosity too. Like, and some people truly do care about others, and there will be, like we've talked about, there will be people that suffer from this, just as people have the argument that the suffering of the babies was also important. They
Yeah.
just care about different suffering.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's
Exactly.
okay, but we do have to not be like total dicks about it, I guess, because there is suffering always on both sides. Like, I understand the pro-lifers, like what they're saying. Ultimately, I don't agree because nobody should be telling anybody what to do.
Yeah.
Like, whether the government supports it or not is another thing.
Well, and that's the thing. If the government is supporting it, then people have to pay for it. And so if you have all these people who believe that it's the murder of a baby, then they don't want their taxes to fund the murder of babies, which, in my opinion, then they should just be allowed to privatize it. But a lot of people feel like then it's not a human right. Then it's like in the hands of corporations and becomes a whole other messy thing. So it is it's a messy debate.
It's messy.
And I think it should just be allowed to be messy. I don't think we should really land on entirely hard stances.
Yeah.
Certainty is not a good thing in the abortion debate. And like you said, it should come down to the sovereignty of that individual. But because we are so unaware as beings, not realizing, even like we don't understand that dark matter is forming our baby in the womb. Like we don't get so much of what's going on. We're living in the dark ages in many ways, if you look at it from that perspective. So our choices, they're not super informed on the level of the collective, on the level of the societal, legal, you know what I mean? Like those higher understandings are not going to make their way into the legal system anytime soon. That's not happening. So what do we have other than the choice of the individual? Like that's the only direction we can move in. Because those systems are all collapsing. They're not working for us. It's not actually it hasn't been functional this entire time. The 50 years of Roe versus Wade, while a lot of people were pumped about it because they agreed with it, it was very flimsy. Right? Those laws were very flimsy. It was never in their constitution. Like it was never something that had any real substance to it. And so its collapse to me is good in the sense that if there is going to be a pro-abortion stance, it should be informed properly and it should be, logical and scientific and not just kind of loose. And I think they undermined their side of the argument by just saying abortion right up until birth, that it's not a human being until it's out of the mother. I think that kind of undermined their argument. And now they really need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what their real argument is. People have seen that image of the woman at the pro-abortion protest who wrote "not yet a human" on her own pregnant belly. So we're dehumanizing babies that would live if they were born, Yeah.
And I don't know if there's anything you can really do but to sort of wake anyone up. You just have to do your own, like, do you, like, essentially in the end. But, we have talked about the alternative. Like, I've seen the horrors of babies who haven't been aborted.
Okay, so the flipper baby story.
Okay,
you got to get into this. You got to get into this because this is for like pro-lifers. This story, I think
I've seen lots of like mutilated babies that have no life and most likely live a life of like horrible pain.
Let's get specific. Let's talk about the specific flipper baby.
Seen a few.
Okay, but there was the one you were talking about the other day. This was what, a mentally ill disabled person, or what was going on here? When you were working as a social worker, this was a client of yours?
Yeah. And so anyway, there was just unwellness, and this person had a deformed baby who was blind and deaf and had like deformed hands.
There were no real fingers, right?
Yeah, there was no like defined fingers. There was something wrong with the feet. Obviously could never walk or talk or eat. And so eventually the baby passed at some point, but lived, I think, a couple of years. I'm not sure. But to me, at the time working with her, I was like, please get an abortion.
Yeah.
Because, well, I didn't ask her in that way. I would always be like, what do you want to do? And sort of consider like, you're very unwell, this person was like, maybe suffering schizophrenia and other mental illnesses and very paranoid and like all of
and
this.
Not physically well. Also,
not assume, physically right? Well. No, everything.
Not
was
a body
bad.
that can nourish a baby.
Life skills were minimal. Like it was bad. But then some part of her, still wanted to keep the baby. And so it was like, wow, okay, like I guess. And so the baby was like, she was in a psychiatric ward for most of the pregnancy. So I just wonder, like, is that important?
Mm-hmm.
Is this important for everyone? Like, I'm not going to say it was the wrong choice because she made her own choice. And so we go with that. But that's the freedom of making the choice. But I wondered, like, is this what they want?
The pro-life side.
Yeah.
They want like little monster babies.
Because the reality is, you're right. The world is still quite sick.
Yeah.
Mentally.
Yeah.
And so the reality of like the lowest levels of like mental unwellness is very dangerous. Yeah. Very dangerous.
Yeah.
And so, potentially not having services for those people would be very detrimental.
Yeah, there was another client you talked about who I think was addicted to crack and didn't know they were pregnant.
Yeah. And then had like, again, I'm not saying some kids can be born addicted to things and then recover and then grow and have great lives and be happy for their existence. Totally. I'm not saying every child, but I'm questioning, is it correct for every child? Mm-hmm. For every child needs...
As a rule, as a law.
So it's good for a few people, but a few others don't feel it's good. They actually grow up and they hate their lives and they become addicts and then they have horrible lives. Yeah. And again, I know very well, we're not here to just have breezy lives. So it's not always about that, but it's about the path that is correct for that person. Mm-hmm. The path that is right for them. So, and not saying that blanketing that all life is good at even at the moment of conception. It's now, so... and human design would say, no, the baby at conception isn't ready for anything yet.
Well, here in
Canada... The baby's nothing now. There's no design. There's no form that can take anything on.
That's right. So in human design, it has to be developed enough to be able to receive a personality.
Yes.
To then become a human being.
Yes.
And so, so from that perspective, you're not killing a human being. You're killing a pre-human. You really are. From
the potential, you could say, you're perhaps... getting in the way of a potential. Mm-hmm. I could see that. I would say, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, because that is the argument from the pro-life side, that it has eye color, height, like it has so many things of its life path already mapped out, or its features, I guess, mapped out in many ways, right? Mm-hmm. It already has a lot of those features. So their argument is you killed something that already had all those things. But again, like we are going to have to develop a more nuanced, more insightful view of this if we're going to evolve past the current sloppy Neanderthal debate that is going on, that is so overpolarized, it lacks nuance entirely. And I think from the stance of government interference in people's lives, removing the Supreme Court, power, or the power that Supreme Court decision created, I think it actually stepped away from government control. I think the states being given the choice is less government control. Again, like it is of course upsetting for, like, let's say a mentally ill person who gets pregnant in an asylum, who is like a raped mentally ill person who's going to have a deformed flipper baby. You do really want to consider services for people in those situations. I agree. You know, I feel that we are just not yet a civilization that can save every life. But I was also thinking that it's very ironic that here in Canada, you know, there's this whole Every Child Matters campaign about the Indigenous people. And yet the same people are angrily fighting for, you know, for abortion. At this point, it's abortion as birth control. Like, I find that to be problematic. You have a lot of things you can do in your life before you get pregnant to not get to that point. Okay, there's like a lot you can do to not have a whoopsies pregnancy.
That's my
in
question
your life
too.
choices.
Like,
So
do you need to have regular abortions? I understand once in a while, and like I said, I have known friends and clients, but even friends, like people who, you know, did have mental health struggles, because we all have things like that at times, and who did have to have, like, you know, multiple abortions. And thank God that they were able to do that, even though, like, admittedly, they were like, yeah, I was in a bad place.
Yeah.
But can't I be in a bad place and not have 5 children
because
of it?
Yeah, but also, I mean, it's sad
so it's
because
tricky.
it can harm that woman's fertility.
Oh, for sure.
Permanently,
for sure.
right?
I do think
she
there's
could
an
lose
extreme.
the ability to have babies entirely. Technically, there could be damage. Like, it's a very harmful thing to a woman's body to get an abortion. This is not a light thing. We're talking, you could get very severe damage. It's a very draining thing to do.
Yes.
It's a harmful thing for a woman to have to do.
And
you know, knowing your cycle as a woman, knowing which days of the month that you're fertile, using, you know, birth control or condoms or so many things. There's so many things you could be doing to not get stuck in the whoopsies pregnancy. I think the number of whoopsies pregnancies could probably be brought down a whole lot. I really don't think that we need to have that. And some of that is coming from this crazy left-wing push to make sex all about pleasure. 100% about pleasure. And, you know, I was looking at some material today. There's some teachers being called out by the right, some left-wing teachers being called out by the right in the US right now, who are looking to teach sex and anatomy-based courses that focus on pleasure to 9-year-olds. And so it's like pleasure-based sex and anatomy for 9-year-old kids. And again, that is the path towards a whole crap ton of whoopsies pregnancies. Raising kids to be fixated on sexual pleasure from 9 up, while removing spirituality and morality that comes from things like religion. You know, you don't have to have religion for those things, but it has served that purpose. It has given a container to an extent to sexual pleasure that I think serves a great amount of purpose for us as a species. But you have like the most extreme, let's say, the left-wing atheist who is really excited to teach 9-year-old children about pleasure-based sex and anatomy. I'll even throw some links in of some of the stuff that's being exposed. I'll throw it into the episode description. But, you know, that path is going to lead to more birth control, more abortion as birth control. And I think that's a really dangerous place to be pushing young women. I think we're seeing the results of it I talk about this a lot, but, you know, I was so sickened when I saw it. All the viral videos on TikTok of the young girls celebrating abortion with little TikTok videos, dancing, celebrating literally the death of the child, saying, this is number 5 for me. Woo, I'm going to go for another one as soon as I need it. And it being promoted to them as feminism and like their sexual pleasure being feminism and the ability to have as much pleasure as you want and just abort it when you need it. This is being promoted. It is being promoted. And so there is no moral, spiritual container in that left-wing space at this point for sex, which I think is really what's going to lead to more unwanted pregnancies where you have to have an abortion. I need it because I can't have a kid right now, but there's really no accountability there for the fact that you got pregnant to begin with.
But you can't make them accountable.
You can't. And this is the thing, is when you bring that up, it's like, oh, then we all have to be conservative Christians. No, I will not. I will not be a conservative Christian and repress my sexuality. And it's like, again, there has to be nuance. No, you don't have to be conservative Christian to learn how to be responsible with your capacity to grow and produce life.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to be.
Well, I think
There's
that's
other ways.
why it's really important to just do you.
But we have to be careful, because that's a mantra of this left-wing extremism. Let women just do them. Let young girls just do themselves. It's up to them. But really, if our culture is leading these young women astray, then it's not that simple. If they've been saturated by culture that focuses on self-pleasuring and total neurotic obsession with your own identity, then just telling someone in that place to do you is a bad idea. It's not going to work.
Well, I think there really isn't much else to do at this point, because the person has to be willing to look at their value systems, which they aren't usually, and the people you're talking about. Not the people I know, but the people I've seen in existence on the internet, the radicals.
Yeah.
But no, I don't know these people. Like, actually, I know they exist in Toronto and stuff, but I don't think they're sort of the larger chunk of people. I do think these are minorities of people, while also very highlighted, just like lots of things have been over the last few years. The silent majority. So I do caution on anyone who sees something and gets like immediately, like anything that happens that you feel is not to be stopped, but to sort of react or act on it or make a decision really fast, or, well, unless you're splenic. But jumping to conclusions, I guess, more than making a decision, like jumping to mental conclusions. I know because I've done it. Because there's just so much to know. I found this part that I wanted to read about, because it was just talking about, this is also a bit from Human Design.
Yeah.
So it's talking about, again, going back to the juxtaposition. So you have the design and you have the personality, right? So you have these two things. They're at odds.
Together. They're at odds, but this is what comes together within the woman to make the human that eventually comes out.
It goes inside the human. So the design crystal ends up, it forms, and it's in your ajna, right?
Which is where?
It's your third eye.
Your third eye. Okay.
That's where your design crystal is going in the body. And the design crystal is not an actual crystal, but it's sort of, anyway, so I'll read this.
Yeah.
A design crystal with its magnetic monopole embedded within it detaches itself from the Earth's core and enters the man in preparation for fertilization. Certain couples can sense the presence of this crystal before they even conceive. Next, a single sperm carrying the design crystal enters the egg during copulation. It isn't necessarily the fastest swimmer that gets the prize. It's simply the one carrying the goods. So this is also new. The whole story that the sperm was so speedy.
This portion from the
There's
earth.
only one sperm that carries the design crystal. And it's carrying it to the egg. It's crazy. It isn't necessary. Yeah. So in other words, the design crystal, once the design crystal is inside the egg, it starts to design the body of the fetus. It will work on this body until the neocortex, the very special brain facility common to all humans, is complete. If the fetus is born prematurely, like we were talking about earlier, it will be fine. If the baby lives, the fetus will just maybe experience a more rapidly developing neocortex because of it. Metaphorically speaking, the neocortex is the back seat of our limousine, which means that this is our capacity to look out in a self-reflected universe. When the design crystal has built the neocortex, the fetus and its magnetic monopole send out a signal, which brings the personality crystal into the body. Because the personality crystal incarnates from above, as it were, a man has given it many names. Here in the West, we know it as the soul. This incarnation always occurs 88 degrees of the sun before birth. This means that our personality has approximately 3 months to adjust to the vehicle before birth.
And then at the moment of birth,
it's programmed.
Yeah. So there's an imprint that happens at that moment that then that has to do with this is just me guessing, that has to do with the magnetic monopole. They come together, right? The magnetic monopole is what's holding
yes, it's
the
holding it
design and the
together.
personality together, but there is a completion of that, of the design and the personality coming together at the moment of birth, which ends up being your full design, right?
That's right. Exactly. So that gives you a sense of like the birth sort of on a very superficial level, but like it's very different, right, from what we've been told about conception and birth and like what really happens, because this is the idea. We had no idea we had this other side. We had no idea we had this design side, and had these like parts of ourselves, like the magnetic monopole, the personality, the design crystal, and that, the design crystal's working away, and that's building your body, your hands, your everything that's coming from the sperm that came from the earth. So in the end, we are all one, because the source of this energy is one source. All this,
Yes, as I have said many times, this earth grows humans.
Yeah.
This earth grows humans.
Yeah, the earth grows humans, and
that's our human growing earth.
But we also need the experience of feeling like we are not the same. Like that's why we are born, and we have personality, and we have a design. And so it's like, well, we have this illusion of separateness, and that's part of being human.
And that's part of the self-reflective aspect of it all.
Yeah.
So, but then this gets into the birth of this universe.
Right.
Right? How is this universe going to be born without this self-reflective capacity? Are we the neocortex of the universe?
Yes, exactly.
Like,
exactly.
Is that the role that we're playing here?
We're building it. We're building the back seat.
Yeah, maybe.
The solar plexus is somehow part of it.
Yes, our emotional capacity. I mean, this is a huge, very crazy conversation, but isn't it interesting that as human design spreads around the world, which is an imprint of information that hit the Earth from a supernova. So a star went supernova, and that was literally a body of information that hit the planet Earth, and everyone for some chunk of time was just being hit with that new information. Isn't it interesting that as we approach this point of no return, so in human design, they talk about the 2027, right? That there is going to be this falling away of a background frequency that we've been reliant upon. And
the cross of planning.
Yeah, and that's something I heard about in many other bodies of material before I encountered human design, that there is literally a frequency that is going to disappear.
Yeah.
And that it might drive some people crazy when this frequency goes away. Now, in the sort of like secret space program ET world, that has been posited as like there has been a machine that was running an evil frequency.
Oh dear.
And that finally there's going to be this victory when this evil machine that has been saturating the earth with this bad frequency is going to be shut down, and suddenly humans are going to be free from it, but they might go a little bit crazy because they've been reliant upon that. And so not that, I don't personally believe that at this point, but it's interesting that there were bodies of information trying to approximate a prediction of some sort of falling away of a background frequency that we have become reliant upon and yet not been aware of. And that there's going to be this big shift. So isn't it interesting that as human design avails us to this information, and science keeps proving a lot of what the human design material brought forward many, many years ago, isn't it interesting that we're hitting this crux with the abortion debate itself? As the universe itself approaches birth, as we move through these conception phases, we are on the microcosmic level struggling with fertility, birth, the development of the fetus. I mean, to me, that's so harmonious. It's so beautiful and fascinating to see, that mirroring occurring on such massive, incredible scales. And what an incredible honor to realize that we are part of the birthing of a universe, that we're in a universe that's still in the conception phase. That is like a mind-boggling idea. That is like the best mushroom trip ever. The realization that again, that that this universe was born and not in the conception phase was an assumption we had. We just assumed that this universe was birthed.
Yeah.
We just assumed it.
I know.
We assumed it. Well, and of course we did. It's understandable because we ourselves were birthed. And so we're like, okay, well, we're out in the universe. So I guess, right? But the notion that we're in a womb, in a cosmic womb right now, working towards, I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine at all. I can't even approximate the birth of a universe if this is a universe in conception right now. I can't. I don't understand. It's too much. It's mind-boggling. Boggles my mind, as Michael Tellinger.
Lots of possibilities.
An incredible amount. So, this is why I thought it was so interesting to look at the Big Bang, dark matter, and abortion, because these things actually do all tie together. That there is this wild connection, and that as we begin to understand the way that dark matter informs the human being more, our ability to struggle or to not struggle, but to proceed in the abortion debate, to evolve as a society with the abortion question, it will come to a great extent, I believe now, from our understanding of how dark matter informs the human being, the human life, the evolution of humans. There's so much there. And so to bring it to what we don't know, I think is really important here. Because that's really what all of this is revealed, right? We didn't know, this is true, we didn't know we were in a universe that was unborn. We didn't know that dark matter was informing the baby and imprinting the baby's body, and then later dark matter was going to imprint the baby's personality. We didn't really understand that. We had astrology pointing to it in a more mystical way, but in some ways, this is a step towards demystifying astrology in that it says, look, you have actual neutrinos causing these imprints that are related to the planets and these celestial bodies. So what we don't know right now from the scientific perspective is how to measure the impact of dark matter on the fetus, let's say, and the extent to which that fetus is in that process. There's so much that's a mystery to us. So given that we don't know that we are so at our beginning phase of understanding, can that just be a call for nuance in the abortion debate? And to get out of the knowing, because there's just way too much knowing and way too much certainty in the abortion debate on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Because from what I've seen in the very extreme responses to it, there's no understanding of any of this. It's total ignorance of how a human being is really formed and what is really going on when a human being develops and then comes into the world. The fact that the body is the life path, and that during this first phase of development, it's the life path that's developing, but it's not developed enough to receive the personality. These are really, really important concepts that I think can progress things. And so I feel that admitting that we really don't understand conception, that it's still a big fucking mystery. It's ridiculous. Even some of the material that you can find, I talked about this in Worlds Within on my series on Rise TV, that there is data showing that the meridians form before the arteries form. And that you have literally blood spiraling. They caught like blood spiraling according to a meridian before the arteries had even formed. They caught blood being pumped by meridians before the heart existed. Mm-hmm. What was pumping the blood? Before the heart existed. So, and to me, again, there's probably a lot going on there with dark matter. Now that we understand that, it's an incredibly complex system to look into. How blood begins to spiral through the body and how the meridians begin to inform it and how dark matter plays a role in that. We're just like little stupid babies who barely understand even the beginnings of that. So how can we take such aggressive stances on this when we are just beginning to learn what's really going on when a human being incarnates on this planet? We barely understand it. So maybe there needs to be some humbleness here in this debate and some recognition from both sides that we don't actually understand. We don't, We just are beginning to glimpse it. And I think that would further the conversation. Right now it's just going to be crazy duality, people freaking out, because that is also kind of just the nature of these times. But I don't know, in just looking for progress and looking for motion on this collective level, I really think that has to do with it, is owning our not knowings, owning what we don't understand, owning what we have failed, or not failed, owning what we have not yet come into an understanding of first, then proceeding with the debate. I think there's a lot there. And then when you come into the knowledge that we're in a conception phase universe, it's like, how would we feel if this universe was aborted? I mean,
maybe some people would be okay with it.
It'd be so devastating. Maybe there's an extreme position. Well, I don't know is there a cosmic debate going on about whether or not this universe gets aborted? Is the same debate raging in the heavens where they're like, this is the most chaotic, deformed universe we've ever seen. This is a flipper baby universe. We really need to kill this pregnancy.
Start again.
It's not right. I'm too stressed. I can't give birth to a universe right now. I'm not doing well. I didn't mean to get pregnant with a universe. It's like there are epic questions. So I don't know. I hope that helps expand people's perspective, I guess, because we're not hardliners on either side of it. We believe that people should have the sovereign choice, but also believe in less government interference. And so, women were aborting before there was government interference. There were always ways for women to do that.
I still just think if we're going to move forward as individuals, if we're really going to want to be free, then we have to start just making our own health choices.
Yeah, that's medical sovereignty. But medical sovereignty is tricky there, because then you rely on a larger system that's constructed for you, or you figure out your own ways to abort.
Yeah. I think you need both. Mm-hmm. Because I think, like I said, at this point in time, society is not evolved, so we still need both. Mm-hmm. Right now. Mm-hmm. I think it's a great mission to try to get people to be more responsible with their lives. Yeah. But then also, I can't really say, from a human design perspective, what your life path looks like.
Yeah, but if someone's authority says I need to abort and they live somewhere where it's illegal, how are they supposed to live out their authority?
Well, their authority would take them away from there.
Had they been living it up until that point, or proceeding from that point.
Ideally, assuming this person is following their authority regularly, if it was for their health,
well, see, but
their authority would have them leaving that state or place, I guess. And now, obviously, that's very simplistic. Most of us are not in positions, because we have been living not self and like all this stuff, that we are not in positions to make drastic changes to our lives. So that's why I think we need both. Mm-hmm. Because we're in a transitory time. We are humans in transitus. So I see the side. I'm 6-line body. I know. I'm like standing over here going, we don't need any of this shit at all. We don't need any of these problems. Let's stop them before they even begin. Yeah. By being responsible, by blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But the point is, this is where we are now. This is where we are at in our developing, our consciousness and human evolution. So when we're transitory, I feel like we need both in order to at least have, the people who are moving forward with starting to step into making their own health choices that are guided. They're following their vehicle. They're following strategy and authority over time, because again, all the deconditioning, everything like that takes years and years and years. So this is long term, but because it's so long term, to get to this level of individuality and freedom, we need both now, because there are so many people who won't in this life have the capacity to come to full body trust and awareness. this knowledge, human design knowledge only became available in like the late 80s.
Yeah.
Or even like early 90s, like once you got more into it.
A lot of it has to do with the culture around it too, though. Having the service is not the same as pumping it as birth control and saying that you should be able to abort right up until the moment of birth and that it's not a human being until it physically leaves the woman's body. Again, those extreme stances have ruined it for the pro-abortion people. They've ruined their own stance because that's an absurd, it's an absurd stance. It's untenable. It's illogical. You can't even use science to back that up. It's an insane position to have.
Very unnecessary.
So when you say we should have both, I guess what do you mean more specifically? Because you can't have that extreme. It's never going to go back to that. It's, people are never going to allow, the pro-lifers will never ever allow it to return to that point of abortion is birth control.
20 weeks.
Yeah, so you're saying people should have the option of 20 weeks. Yeah. Based on human design, essentially, right?
I guess. I don't know. It just felt right to say it. But I think it's 20 weeks here in Canada. 20 or 22.
Yeah.
But it's under 6 months. I believe. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. They could have changed it. But last time I was even looking into things like that, it was 20 or 22 or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so there is, I think, whatever happens with this whole insanity, there is going to be hopefully some nuance that arises from it. And, we'll have to watch states like New York and California and see where they take it. Currently, they're pushing for the 24 or 28 week abortions.
If you have that for like the person that I knew who just found out they were pregnant at not like 8 months, okay, I guess. But even then it's like, there might be other options. Right. Yeah. So I think that's a very unique situation that you don't need to offer to everyday people.
Well, and again, I'll say that the pro-abortion side has ruined their own argument by using these little one-off rare situations as their main evidence. Only like 1% of abortions come from rape, from things like that. You know what I mean? You're looking at very niche situations like our society should be able to handle those niche situations.
That's why I think anything that causes you to be emotionally sort of like reactive and to either make an emotional decision or act on something when you're at like a peak emotional wave, either way, like if you're defined emotional and you're like all heated up and jazzed, maybe you're angry or whatever, or if you're an open emotional and you're like exaggerating, you're amplifying something that's going on, you're making emotional decisions, like, not to say that you can't be angry. It's not to stop it. It's not to stop that, but it's not the time to like make a decision for yourself, based at least for yourself.
Well, and again, that's what's so awesome about human design. It's the first system that says, here's how this specific being makes decisions. Here's how you make decisions.
And it has nothing to do with logic. So that's why in this scenario, if I ever had that experience, like, could you trust your vehicle, right? Could you trust it enough? Because most of us have made mental strategies about what's ethical and what is best.
Yes.
But when it comes to it, like I've heard people say, like, I wasn't going to get the vaccine, and then my strategy said yes.
Yeah.
So could you trust yourself? If you were a conspiracy theorist, and you were full blown trusting your body, and all of a sudden the body said, get this, or you won't be healthy, essentially. The body said yes to a vaccine. Could you do it? Yeah. I couldn't.
No, I agree.
Not
and this
right
is
now.
Very interesting. Like,
my mind
if you
is
got pregnant and your authority said keep the baby, but your mind freaked out and said no, then you're potentially, you're undermining your own life path.
Yeah.
And causing disharmony for yourself.
So,
and there's stories like this where there's like two people who are crack addicts, and there was a pregnancy, and the pregnancy motivated them to clean up their entire lives, and they became a healthy family, and like the baby became the path to wellness for these people. And there's lots of stories like that.
Possible.
There's lots of stories like that. The pro-lifers use those stories all the time. They gather them and put them in a little library and, shoot them into the world all the time.
But the problem is these people don't want to have kids. And so, it would be ideal if they would be responsible, because the truth is it's not that easy to get pregnant. It's very specific.
It's that one little small
So,
window of fertility in the woman's
if
month.
you can't handle
How?
like
What is it, 5 days?
the cycle of your body, yeah, give or take or whatever, even if you decided to say like a whole week, but
Okay, so let's say maximum a woman has 7 days of fertility. Can you not
But it's
learn your
less.
own body? I know, but I'm just for argument's sake.
yes.
Let's say you give it a 7-day window because it shifts and you can't be hyper specific, whatever, you know? Either way, can
Yeah.
women not be culturally, educationally guided to
Mhm.
understand their bodies on such a nuanced level that they're able to manage their sex lives?
They can if they want to,
This is what I mean. It's so absurd that that option
but
exists.
they don't want to.
That the option to know your body well enough that you can have lots of pleasure-based sex and not get pregnant. You can. You can do that. Now, there's, I think, always a slight risk of pregnancy. Let's say some other thing goes on. But generally speaking, women everywhere could be raised with that knowing. And that would probably plummet the number of unwanted pregnancies. It would absolutely demolish those numbers.
I think that's why it's not a concern. Like, I think really, I'm kind of happy to see the debate even be volatile, I guess, at times if it needs to be, and be so silly, like you said, that they're throwing themselves under the bus. Like, I think that's a good thing, because the more that something like we've seen with COVID and we've seen with the COVID restrictions, it's helped people see like it kind of has to be ridiculous, outlandish, extreme.
Yeah.
I believe it all in the end, it's the end of the cross of planning. I think this is all part of it.
This is what's falling away in 2027.
It's just part of it.
Yeah, it's the chaos, the requisite chaos.
It's been happening for years now.
End times
You
madness,
know,
as they say.
like the 2012 stuff, all the pandemics over the years. This has been a slow sort of lead up to it. So it's not just now, but it is getting closer. So it's no shock to me that 2020 was like a year of a big upheaval, 7 years before we shift. And again, it's not like the light switch turns on and we're all of a sudden in the next sort of path, but
No.
it is like going to, you know, we're going to see that what it is like to have the background frequency fall away. And so when things like this become like kind of silly, where you're like, they want to kill a lot babies after they're born, and like, yes, it is disturbing that that has happened.
Mhm.
And I do really mourn for those babies and the moms, because that's surely not okay mentally, even if they tell themselves it's okay. Surely that's a lot to go through. And so even if you thought that it was the right thing to do for you, you know, these outlandish things like this is helping people see that something extreme is maybe not the way, like the restrictions and locking people in their homes and, you know, the mental degrade and like all of the things that are going on, that people are like, yeah, what is going on? That's so ridiculous. Like, this is silly.
Well, you see all the
So,
pro-abortionists
it's
now
helpful.
struggling to answer the vaccine question. Then, if you support the
Yeah.
right to abortion, my body, my choice, do you support it? Do you support forcing vaccines? And you can see lots of footage of them just stammering, just yammering on. They go into gibberish. They can't answer. They
Yeah.
can't form a clear thought because their argument is absurd. And that's
Yeah.
good. You're right. There's really healthy things that are going to come from the increased absurdity.
Yeah. It's already happening. And, you know, more and more people are starting to experiment with trusting their body and what that
that's what we
might
need to
even
do.
look like.
I know, and that's what we need to do, because if
it's
we're moving
really
into this
hard to
era
do.
where we are going to lose the ability to rely on like a frequency that was about outer authority,
Yeah.
right? A frequency that essentially said you can live your life by these outer authorities.
Yeah.
And that falls away, and you're going to need your inner authority as that falls away. Hell yes, we have to proceed in this way. So, yeah. Okay. Well, I think we can just wrap this conversation up. That was kind of an epic one.
Long.
That was cosmic and incredible. But yeah. So that's it. And like we said, we will at some point be doing an episode that is focused more overtly on sort of the stages of human development from the human design perspective and get more deep into that info. And yeah, but that's it for today. Thank you for joining us on the
Thank
Finding
you.
Free Thought podcast.
So fun.
See you guys next time.